Credentials verified. Welcome back, Commander Nell. After many failed experiments trying to reverse engineer Black Hole's cloning tech, Test Subject 19-0B has finally proven a success. Final checks are underway and he will be ready for battlefield deployment in approximately 23 hours. Should I continue with this template to create more?
Hey look, someone left their computer open and logged in. I think I'll just... This is mine now. Alright, you know what this means. Lunar Knight's here, and today we're going to be attempting to beat Advance Wars 2 with the best, worst commander in the game. None other than Flak. If you enjoy this type of content, make sure you leave a like, comment, or subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. Anyways, so if you've played before, you already know how terrible Flak is. But in case you're new, let me give you a quick rundown on what makes him so bad. Normally when a unit attacks another unit, you get a nice estimate of how much damage it will do, allowing you to accurately strategize your attacks. You might even get the chance to do a bit of extra damage because of a mostly hidden mechanic called luck, which rolls a number that adds a modifier to your attack. For almost every commander in the game, luck is a net positive bonus. However, Flak is not so, well, lucky. He has both positive and negative luck, and a lot of both. In effect, the damage estimate is just a suggestion to Flak, and playing him is like playing roulette. You might do more damage than you expect with a hit, or you might do significantly less. In my experience, if you need a strong hit, you're going to get a weak one. And if a weak one would be fine, that's when you get your strong one. It even gets worse because there are times where you intentionally want a weak hit, and at least with my luck, those are the times I always roll really high. I won't dive into the specifics of how this works because it's percentage based and it gets pretty wordy, but for those of you that want a little more detail, I'll summarize it by saying that with a normal hit against a reasonable target, you can expect your damage output to fall somewhere within a 3 to 4 point range. When you use his CO powers, this gets even crazier, with his super boasting an 11-point dispersion ratio. Oh, and just because you're using a power doesn't mean you're going to do more damage. Since it's just a higher luck dispersion, you will sometimes find yourself doing even less damage than a normal attack could possibly do. So yeah, that's Flak, RNG the commander. Let's see how it goes. Starting off, we march into Orange Star against none other than our evil doppelganger, Bad Flak. His power is so absolutely stunning that he's already conquered most of the continent, and it's up to us to take it back. Flak versus Flak missions are pretty amusing because it's now RNG on both sides. You're effectively playing a game of war, the card game, where it's luck of the draw. That said, this is the tutorial world, and Flak is the weakest commander in the game, so Orange Star doesn't really pose any significant threat to a run. But it does already highlight some of the interesting quirks, a few of which will become very problematic later on. The first of these is amusing. So while my commander has been changed, the game still partially thinks I'm playing the correct commander, since most of these missions don't have a selection option. As a result, the victory quotes are hard-coded in, but the commander who appears beside them changes as it should. This means we get to see Flak making some rather unexpected victory quotes instead of his normal which is even better in Orange Star because the normal commanders here like to insult Flak. Now, we get to see Flak making fun of Flak. What a time to be alive, right? The other big point is that while it's not enough to change the outcome of any of these battles yet, I can already feel the difference being luck-based makes, and it's certainly not for the better. The first two missions were smooth and felt normal, but already by Flak's first mission, I can feel the negative change, and it slightly alters how it goes as enemy units become tougher to reliably take out. Again, it's nothing serious yet since this is just the intro world, but I can tell it's going to get much, much worse as we progress and the stakes get higher. For now though, as long as Flak is here, Orange Star is safe. The other mission of concern going in was Sammy's time-based capture mission. I'm quite worried about Flak's random damage when it comes to time missions in general, because I don't put it past my luck to low roll a ridiculous number of attacks and run out of time because of it. This mission starts out with Lash insulting Flak's intelligence, so it's personal too. At first, everything feels pretty normal, until I realize there's something very wrong with this start. When I try to move my T-copter, there is no safe spot to go, and this was really confusing at first for a tutorial mission. It took me longer than I care to admit to realize that the reason for this is because Sammy has a +1 movement on transports, and the mission was already taking that into account. It also wasn't particularly reassuring since once again, we're working with a time limit here. This slightly changed the play since I needed to take an extra step to protect my copter, but I was able to do so with my cruiser, and by the end, that paid off. Yes, my luck ended up being acceptable enough that I could go for a route, but it only felt right to complete this mission with a capture and show the world that Sammy has been dethroned and we now have a new capture champion. Oh, and Nell was oddly concerned about Flak having reinforcement troops on their way. I think she's afraid of his brilliance. After all, we're within Orange Star borders, so reinforcements should probably be more available than ever. Why wasn't she smart enough to request some first? Or maybe she's afraid he's concentrating his power to dethrone her as the next leader of Orange Star. We'll have to wait and see.
You're under arrest, Chancellor.
Are you threatening me?
The Senate will decide your fate.
I am the Senate.
The lab mission was up next, and once again, the dialogue made this one amusing. Effectively, Flak is racing Flak to save the documents that he himself is trying to destroy. Imagine if cloning wasn't so normal in this universe. It looked like either Flak is going senile, or there's some alternate timelines colliding here, and our hero is actually battling his evil future self. Either way, I route the lab mission this time as payback for its hidden lander almost costing me a run in a previous challenge, and because it seemed most like how Flak would choose to finish the mission. After all, Flak's got a smash. It isn't long after that we come to the factory mission, and I just want to say that this mission felt weird. It's been a long time since I've played this mission normally, or at least semi-normally. Capturing bases, building units that aren't infantry, it feels so wrong. I even got to build a bomber later on. A bomber! What is this thing? Bomber OP.
Wow.
The pipe falls, Sammy pretends she did something when clearly Flak did all the work, on both sides, and then we're off to Blue Moon. Typically in my runs, this is where the game starts to kick it up a notch, going from reasonable to is this even possible by the time I get to the factory mission. It starts out smoothly with Colin's first mission, and while I don't have his level of powerful unit spam, B-Copter spam is more than enough to net me a comfortable S-rank win. From there, we march to Olaf's hometown, and though Flak has no personal connection to it, this clone is pretty empathetic it seems. So rather than let Olaf fight when he's too emotional to think clearly, we step in to send Lash packing. Or maybe he just wanted to smash up more of the town with a battle. We'll never know. The only real point of note is that Lash was being a total pain about letting me capture the lab map because she kept sitting indirects in range of it. But persistence pays off, and we eventually get it. Oh, and this is the end quote we get. Make of it what you will. I know I certainly have some questions. Is he planning to restore Black Hole? Was he abducted to fight for them from somewhere else? Has Nell brainwashed him? Since we now have the map, it's off to the lab we go. And I'll say that this mission here is the first time I was seriously worried about whether we could win. Once again, we're dealing with a time limit, 15 turns in this case, and normally the commanders for Blue Moon are all really good for this mission. Colin overwhelms the enemy, Olaf holds and stalls for a capture, and Grit, well, he's Grit. Like before, I'm worried about those inconsistent roles. Holding the left flank isn't usually very feasible in this mission, and this time I especially don't expect to last long here. Nor am I excited to try clearing out the lab defenders. To that end, I sprint for the missiles on the map to weaken them and stall Lash's captures to delay the coming onslaught. Everything I do at the left choke point will also be dedicated to stalling, and while it's not a lot, I use the mountains to waste just a bit more of her time. I damage the defenders enough that Lash decided to pull most of them out of position, and through saving up carefully for key units like a medium tank, I'm able to get into position and start capturing on day 5. She sends infantry to stop me, but it's too little too late, and I take the lab with 4 days remaining. Honestly, much easier than I expected. With this run, there's a few missions I had already decided I wasn't going to do if I could help it. The first of these that I came across was Grit's Tank Brigade mission, and that's because I did another challenge where I attempted that with someone who is situationally worse in it. To that end, I wanted to do the Flak missile mission, but this is where I ran into a big problem. The mod I'm using to select my commander only allows me to select one commander from each nation, similar to how the base game works when you can choose multiple COs. Because of this, I'm not able to pick 2 Flaks, which puts me in a bit of a dilemma. How can I still do a faithful Flak only run when I can't have only Flak? At this point, it's not the end of the world because there are other solo missions around. But every factory mission going forward has multiple nations involved that will present this same problem. And factory missions are a requirement to complete the game. I'm not sure what to do at this point, so I put out a poll to all of you, and in the meantime, I went on to a different mission, the Flak mission in Yellow Comet. But wait, Lunar Knights, why are you jumping over to Yellow Comet already when you haven't completed Blue Moon and can do other missions still? Well, I don't know. I filmed this run a while before getting to writing the script, and I genuinely have no idea why I decided to do this. But for some reason, I did. Maybe I just felt like facing Flak with Flak again. Or perhaps because I wanted to see how he would fare in a mission designed for the incredibly powerful convoy. Not a clue. But hello everyone, and welcome to Yellow Comet. Thank you for flying Air Flak, the safest airlines so long as there's not too much flak. We're also the only company that employs indirect bombers, currently out of stock though. We're here now, so here we go. My approach to this mission is pretty standard for how you'd normally play this mission. But this time, I'm putting extra priority in rushing the bases on the center island because I'm not as confident I'll be able to hold it. With Convoy, once you're on that island, it's very hard to dislodge you because of his heightened defense. But not only is Flak missing out on that, but he's also lacking the incredible firepower that goes with it. I'm going to need extra reinforcements ASAP if I'm going to last. Once I have a base, I start using the middle missiles to damage other Flak's units and waste some of his funds on repair. This means targeting his lander for now and whatever scary units happen to be in range of it. I bring a tank up from my home base that will eventually serve as a wall, but I'm prioritizing ranged units on the island both to attack more easily and because they are the most cost-effective since I can do damage rolls without being punished as hard on counterattack damage if I roll low. From here, it becomes a slow push with a growing tank wall and additional indirect units to force him back into his own base and wear him down. Because I'm doing so much extra damage than he is, it means he is also able to use his CO powers regularly. But this is still Flak we're dealing with, so his powers are just as bad as ours are, and sometimes I'm even saving on damage thanks to that dispersion we talked about. Anyways, now it's mission complete and time to continue onward into Yellow Comet. Wait, no. Seems I went back into Blue Moon again. Yeah. I really don't know why I did that Yellow Comet mission when I did. But it does highlight the flexibility the midsection this game gives you, and being able to swap back and forth between the two continents at will is something I've always loved, because you can approach each run a little differently. Let me know in the comments how you like to play this section. Do you go one continent at a time, or both simultaneously? If one at a time, who comes first? Now that we're back in Blue Moon, it's time to address the elephant in the room. The last time I was here, I put out a poll asking how I should proceed to be most faithful to the challenge, and you voted that allies could help so long as Flak always gets the finishing blow. First of all, thank you to everyone that voted. It was awesome seeing so many of you weigh in. Secondly, we have found a solution, the ultimate solution. After putting up this poll, a subscriber reached out and was able to help me use something called hex coding to force every allied commander on the map to become Flak. This means that we are back on track to a Flak-only run in its purest form. I'm probably going to pronounce your name wrong, so apologies in advance, but shout out to Skryza for their huge help here. With those edits, we can now return to the giant missile for some Flak and Flak versus Flak action. Time to continue the low-rolling pain. This is a timed mission to capture 8 properties too, so extra challenge. Our primary Flak continues to be green, and our secondary, newly cloned Flak is now blue. This is actually a little confusing to play because normally the first commander is blue since it's Olaf, but their units are so different it's nothing too serious. When it comes to this mission, my Flaks are objectively worse than their counterparts in every way. Andy is great here because he can heal his damaged units and do consistent damage, meanwhile Olaf also does consistent damage while boasting a global damage power that is great for whittling down enemy Flak's tanks in the middle. I'm calling it now. All these Flaks are going to get confusing to describe. Because of how much of a disadvantage I have, I'm not even going to bother trying to save my units in the south, but I will breach 2 of the northern pipes to reinforce the middle. The progression is relatively standard, just slower, and there's 2 back-to-back supers used later in this mission that do a nice job of highlighting how random chance is when they're active. Enemy Flak really gets lucky with his, as I feel the AI tends to do. Then on my turn, I attack 2 basic tanks with medium tanks, one after another against identical terrain. One ends up doing 2 points of damage less than was predicted, Meanwhile, the other does 3 points more. A third, attacking a city, also manages to do an additional 3 points, which especially surprises me. I think this might be one of the luckiest supers I used all run. I should also mention that making these attacks as Flak is weirdly satisfying. Maybe Nintendo should stick a gambling warning on him in the remaster. I'd like to say the rest of the run goes smoothly thanks to these big rolls, but it's actually pretty tense, mostly because of Flak 2's dwindling air force. Lacking Andy's repairability is something you really feel on a pre-deployed mission like this, and if I wasn't hiding his fighter over on my Flak 1's side of the map, getting routed might have been a real fear in the back of my mind. I start my first capture with 9 days remaining. I have 3 infantry total in my army. Thankfully, Flak's property captures aren't random. Real talk, imagine for a second how terrible that would be if captures had random rolls to them too. Flak is already the weakest commander, but if he had that mechanic, he'd go from bottom of the barrel to somewhere down in the planet's core. Enemy Flak still has 2 medium tanks in the middle at this stage that are continuing to be a pain by sitting on properties, as well as just generally being threatening. With 7 days left, I finally move them from the equation, and all that's left is to rush against the clock and hope that enemy Flak doesn't decide to position an indirect in the bottom section of the map where it will zone out a capture. If that happens, it's game over since the AI prioritizes attacking capturing units. He did build 1 rockets that had the potential to do it, but thankfully he wasn't smart enough to do so, and we secure the win. The final quote on this one was extra fitting. If my Flaks are all clones, does that mean it's I or we? Are they a hive mind too, since I'm technically controlling all of their movements? We're getting in deep now, this is too much philosophy. Grit's HQ challenge mission is up next. To win, I need to make my way through a massive forest to reach my HQ at the top of the map, and place a unit on it. Lash has troops scattered all throughout the forest, as well as 3 black cannons that have massive map coverage that will devastate any unit of mine that is not shrouded in the veil of fog of war. Normally this mission plays well into Grit's commander strengths. You can take it nice and slow, gradually revealing units and then bombing them from existence with his indirect units, which receive boosted damage as well as an amazing +1 range by default. Flak not only lacks these perks on a mission designed to accommodate them, but his bad luck modifier actively sabotages my advance because if I am revealed by an enemy unit and low roll my attacks, I might as well just say goodbye to my unit as the cannons hammer it. Oh, and lacking the boosted range also makes it harder to hit enemy units as well as actually clear the cannons to speed my northern advance. So yeah, it's going to be a long, slow march. At this point, this mission was probably the hardest so far. There's not really a ton to say about it though, because it's pretty much what you expect. But just because you're expecting the challenge doesn't mean it's any easier, especially on a pre-deployed mission where there's really only one major strategy. As a result, the victory itself comes down to the finer details of execution. My usually powerful rockets also spend a ridiculous amount of time trying to get into position to do anything, since without being able to clear the cannons, they can't use the roads, and their movement through forests is horrendous. You can pretty much pretend they don't even exist outside the opening conflict. This mission takes over 20 minutes, but in the end, it is a victory thanks to the amazing patience of our hero, Flak. Now only the factory remains as a barrier to the liberation of Blue Moon, and we are joined by Orange Star Flak to confront it. Normally when you play this mission, your advantage is having access to 2 different COs for double the powers and possible synergies. In this case, I just have 2 Flaks, so it really feels like I'm attacking with one army, but happen to have some extra units that are slightly inconvenient to use because they're in a different control group. To that end, I decide from the start that I'm going to let Green Flak have all of the bases just to simplify the experience on my end, though the trade-off is that I'll have to be careful not to lose all of Red Flak's forces, since doing so is a lost condition. I'll save 1 city for Red to maybe use for repairs, but everything else will be for Green. While Red Flak charges forward with the intent of stalling Lash and potentially blocking the factory doors to prevent future spawns, Green Flak will spread out for captures and dump any spare funds into tanks to send north. This will be critical for supporting Red Flak right now, and it won't be long until I block the first doors, even though I'll immediately lose it next turn. Remember, factories allow my opponent to spawn free units that can move right away, so if I can't stop that, I will eventually be overwhelmed by sheer volume. Time passes, and I eventually secure the entrance, using missiles to damage Lash's forces to help hold. While doing this, I launch one that splashes the pipe seam, and it got me thinking, why can't these giant missiles that are launched from city-sized platforms damage the pipe? We're told in-game that they are completely impervious to it because of how strong the construction is. But how is it possible for that to be true when an infantry unit with a machine gun can technically destroy a pipe all alone if given enough turns? If the pipe is so durable that a missile doesn't even scratch it to deal a single point of damage, then that handheld machine gun shouldn't be able to do anything at all. Yet each turn, it can do a point of damage. Let's also take note that the missile can do 3 points of damage to any unit in the game, but there are plenty of units that the infantry can't even do 1 point of damage to. I know it's a gameplay mechanic, but I can't help wondering why it is that way when there's never enough missiles on a map to destroy a pipe seam, nor would you want to waste a valuable missile on it. I also can't help but wonder if there's any kind of in-world explanation we can give it. Anyways, I ignore the right flank, and to make this interesting, I decided I wanted to destroy the pipe seam with a bomber, since you don't use those too often in this variant of the mission. But without access to the factory, Lash isn't too much of a threat unless you were to decide to build some indirect anti-air. She doesn't on the turn it matters, and I'm safe to destroy the pipe the next turn while her unit watches helplessly and... Wait, actually? I think I'll just end my turn. Let's be sporting, and let the missile unit take one shot. Totally intentional to build up my superpower for style points, and not because I accidentally hit end turn too early. Right? It's back to Yellow Comet, and Sensei's coastal mission is up first. This mission is always either really hard or really easy. There's no middle ground. And I have no idea which side Flak is going to fall on. When you play it normally, you have access to Sensei's ridiculous infantry and B-copter buffs. But now we're dice rolling instead. I take the standard approach by rushing the middle while blocking the left. The end result of this is that B-copters aren't anywhere near as effective for pushing, and I need to begin switching over to bombers instead while holding the left flank in stalemate. 2 bombers are enough to break the stall, and from there it's just about cleanup. The mission itself was relatively easy, especially compared to some of the other times I've been here, and that's a much welcome change. That said, B-copters also felt like they did more as tile blockers than damage dealers because of the bad luck mechanic is really rough given how vulnerable they can be. I'm glad my opponent didn't have air units of his own. Up next is Sonya for the factory mission to acquire the lab map. This mission is all about surviving the initial onslaught from Adder, and so long as you do that without letting him capture bases, it becomes a guaranteed win since he has limited units and you don't. While I let some footage play, it's worth saying that even if it's not the case on this particular mission, I'm really feeling the firepower difference now as we're creeping further into the campaign with harder missions as well as replacing the significantly better commanders that are supposed to be in them. I was really noticing the damage drop off last mission, and the upcoming map mission is worrisome since it already tends to be tight on time normally. I go out of my way to finish this mission with a battleship to spice it up, since I question whether anyone's actually ever done that, and the end quote seems like the complete opposite of everything our boy Flak stands for. I was torn when picking the next mission, but decided to go for Sonya's other mission since I had skipped Grid's equivalent. This one was certain to be an interesting one with its emphasis on dealing damage, which I can't consistently do, and the lack of Sonya's Fog of War CO power. Flak, thankfully, isn't max, but I was still on edge the entire time. There's not too much you can do besides try to position your indirects in good spots, and hope the AI decides to move into range. In the Grit variant, you can form some makeshift walls to block them, but the middle section is too wide for that here. When I fire, I prioritize healthy units over damaged ones and hope she will join them after and save me a shot. Neo and medium tanks get the most focus because of what they can do to my defensive tanks, but in general, I try to whittle down anything I can. When Lash activates her super, I focus on units that are on roads because she doesn't receive a bonus there, which unfortunately means I have to ignore a very scary mech unit on a mountain. But the good news is that he can't see my indirects because they were in forests. The mission ends with a rockets unit making a final stand in a captured city, which I of course flex on by using my power first. The lab mission is up next, and with it sees the arrival of those Orange Star reinforcements that Flak summoned way back toward the start of the run. It's not very much, 3 battleships and a cruiser, but it's better than nothing. The Orange Star ships don't usually get to do much after the initial few turns besides zoning, so I don't hesitate in trading my cruiser to damage a bomber, even though it means leaving my battleships exposed. The bulk of this battle will be on our primary Flak in green anyways. We have 18 days to take the lab this time to secure Neo tanks for our Flak operating in Yellow Comet. Usually Sensei is the top pick here, which means I'm really going to feel the power loss again. Time ticks down, and Adder fortifies his island as I get my economy running to produce bombers and B-copters. With how much ground I need to cross, air units are my only hope. When I make my assault, the orange starships help out again by going into range to bait some of the stronger units out for a little. And paired with a combination of bomber devastation and careful tile stalling, we were able to capture the lab with a day to spare and some superpower flair. Whew, if you can't hear it in my voice, this was a tense one, but it went well. I have the final factory and Neo tanks available now, so I gather my strength and take the fight right to there. This time, taking Sensei as my secondary so that when I switch him to Flak, I will have a yellow Flak to be more thematic with the mission's story. This also marks the special moment that we've now seen a Flak of every color appear in this run. This one should be really easy. On a previous occasion, I managed to speedrun this map with only 2 battleships for a quick win, and so I'll do the same to show how powerful our hero Flaks are. Also, I wanted to see how lucky I really was that time. This strategy means a few resets until RNG has Adder send his free battleship north toward player 2 instead of south. When he's locked into this path, I can build my first battleship and immediately start heading north. I take out a key mini cannon, which thankfully has set damage values and isn't RNG for Flak, and all seems to be going well at first as I move up further. On the next turn, Adder builds 2 B-copters and sends them directly west at my battleship, but I slip through and they don't pursue. All is still looking good as I get into position, so this should definitely be that easy win I was... Wait, a sub heads straight after me. I get first strike on the pipe and try to bring my second battleship into range as bait. This is the moment of truth. Thankfully, the AI likes to prioritize attacking units that it can destroy, so... Oh, the B-copters. And now my battleship. Well, maybe this isn't going to be as easy as I thought.